"Don't come to the meeting," my boss texted, 5 words that felt like a hand on the back of my neck. I was already in the lobby, shoes squeaking on polished stone, my access badge blinking red where it had always blinked green. I stood there, pretending to scroll like everyone else, and realized this wasn't a miscommunication. It was extraction. Remove the one person who could say what actually happened. I'm an operations analyst, which is a fancy way of saying I'm the person who writes the boring sentence that keeps the fire from starting. I live in timelines, audit trails, risk registers, and that quiet hum you hear when the worst case scenario has been considered and neutralized. My boss, let's call her S, lives in slides. S believes reality is a mood board, and every time a number makes the mood worse, she edits the number. "It's not lying, it's storytelling," she once said when I pointed out that our 99.5% uptime had included a 2-hour regional outage. We're not a courtroom, we're a company. Today was the quarterly renewal with our flagship client, the one that floats more than one executive's bonus and attracts bored observers who aren't really observers. It's the only meeting where the client's COO shows up with her camera on and her legal counsel watching the chat like a hawk. We weren't just selling features. We were selling trust that we hadn't chipped away with half-truths and last-minute hotfixes. S had streamlined the deck at 6:17 a.m. by removing the known issues slide I had fought to keep, and by burying an incident timeline that showed 3 red blocks where she wanted 1. My phone shook again. "No need for you to attend. I'll present. We'll circle back." There was a smiley face. I looked up at the turnstiles. Security glanced at me, not unkindly, and pretended not to see the red light. It's amazing how much corporate life runs on genteel pretending. We didn't see that. That wasn't said. This never happened. 3 weeks earlier, the client's COO had pulled me aside after a tense Q&A and said, "You're the only one who answered a question without polishing it first. If something ever smells wrong, call me directly." She said it lightly, like an adult giving a kid permission to call collect. I saved her number under a label that wasn't her name. If this goes sideways, I didn't think I'd use it. I just liked knowing it was there. The way you like knowing where the fire extinguisher is, even if you never touch it. S had a pattern, and patterns are the only reason I can sleep. Last-minute agenda swaps. Version control done in JPEGs. Deleting comments so it doesn't look messy. Pretending the client was confused when they noticed a shift in SLA thresholds from 99.9% monthly to 99.9% quarterly. When I raised it, S said, "We're not changing the service. We're changing the story." The trick worked until the trick didn't. I started protecting myself in the only way a non-executive can. Quiet documentation. I set our reporting pipeline to auto-publish read-only snapshots to a non-shareable, time-stamped S3 bucket with lifecycle policies and object lock. I built a 1-page truth sheet summarizing 3 months of incidents with links deep enough to survive the inevitable slide diet, and I scheduled an email to myself and our general counsel, GC, that sat in drafts with the subject line, "Contingency materials, time locked." Not to be dramatic, to be ready. At 9:02 a.m., the lobby buzzed with the meeting's attendees. I recognized a partner from the client's finance team. I recognized our VP of sales juking left to avoid me because S had likely told him I was heads down in operations. I recognized the in-house lawyer who has never smiled at anyone, ever, which I take as a sign of integrity. My badge blinked red again. The security guard finally walked over. "Looks like your access was restricted this morning," he said, reading another text from S. "We can issue you a visitor pass. Please confirm you received my message. Do not join the call. He waited. I'll debrief." I didn't call S. No, please. I wasn't going to ask the person who locked the door to open it. And the timestamp was the precise minute our pre-brief was supposed to start. She had taken away my timing, my access, and my voice, and she was asking me to confirm receipt like we were FedEx. I stepped away from the turnstiles to a bench under a ficus, opened the Notes app, and reread my truth sheet. It's funny what your brain does when it's scared. mind checks hyphens. I fixed one. I added a sentence clarifying that the alert suppression window had been extended without a change request. I told myself, only facts, no adjectives. I scrolled to the saved contact, the one without a name. The number looked suddenly long, like a code I wasn't authorized to use. I toggled the calendar. The meeting invite still had my name on it, but I was optional now. Optional, as if telling the truth were optional, as if presenting the risk register I wrote were an act of vanity. I thought about the last year, about the junior analyst who cried in a huddle because she'd been asked to remove the word incident from a timeline and use event instead. Words matter, S had told her while smiling, and our words should be positive. I thought about the 2 a.m. Slack, the IT on-call engineer begging for a revert while S typed, "Client doesn't need to know this level of detail." I thought about the COO's face when I said in that earlier meeting, "We undercounted the disruption by 19 minutes because our health check was only synthetic. We've corrected the monitor to measure user traffic." She had paused, then nodded once, like the only thing she needed was someone who spoke in verbs. I opened mail. The draft to GC sat there, breathing like a backup parachute. I changed the scheduled send from on send to 10 a.m., the start of the client call. I attached the one sheet and 3 object lock links. I added one line at the top. "Sending this because I have been asked not to attend the meeting where these will be discussed." I would love to say I felt brave. I didn't. My hands shook and my chest felt hollow, and a part of me still hoped S was right and I was overreacting, and that all she wanted was a clean narrative that wouldn't spook the client. But I tried on another possibility, that telling the truth early prevents a much uglier truth later. If you've ever been the only person in a room who knows where the bodies aren't buried, you recognize the weight. It doesn't feel like a soapbox. It feels like a crate you don't put down. Someone from our side walked past and half raised a hand. "Did S move you to overflow?" he asked, like this was logistics. "Something like that," I said. He kept walking. My phone buzzed again a third time, loud in the quiet. "Do not contact the client directly." That line did it. I'm allergic to preemptive gag orders. You learn in ops that when someone tells you what not to do before you've done it, they're telling you what they did. I pressed the number. The call screen innocently showed the city and a generic mobile. A dull ring, not the cheery chime our internal system uses. I watched my reflection in the phone's black margin like I was someone else. Second ring. Third. I rehearsed my first sentence the way you rehearse a confession. "I will stick to facts. We edited the deck at 6:17 a.m. to remove incident details that materially affect the SLA narrative. I have the immutable logs." Fourth ring. I thought about hanging up. I told myself I wasn't accusing anyone of intent. I was describing behavior. There's a difference. She picked up on the half ring between tones, like she'd been staring at the screen. "This is M," she said, brisk and calm. I swallowed. "It's me," I said, giving my name. "You told me to call if anything smelled wrong." There was a micro pause. Not defensive, not surprised. Just a recalibration. I didn't waste her time. "Does it?" Throat clearing. She asked. "I'll stick to facts," I said. "I'll be brief, and I'll send you 3 links while we're on the phone." Our VP changed the deck, deleted known issues, condensed the incident timeline, and moved SLA thresholds from monthly to quarterly without a contract writer. I have read only links with object lock and Git history. Sending now. I tapped the draft to GC and hit send. 3 links left my phone like flares over dark water. "Open your email," I added. Subject line starts contingency materials. A soft exhale on her end. "I see it. Stay on the line." Paper sounds. A second voice joined, her legal lead, measured and dry. "We'll verify timestamps independently," he said. "Please don't characterize intent." "I won't," I said. "Only behavior." If this sounds heroic, it wasn't. It was procedural. Everything I had was the result of months of being the person who takes meeting minutes no one thinks they'll ever need. the slow knife, parallel documentation, immutable storage. A folder called Receipts Final, where every file name begins with a 4-digit date. People like S call it paranoia. I call it the cost of sleeping at night. The first time I learned to do this was after a near miss in February. We pushed a Friday hotfix to Resolve UI Hangs that masked a degraded queue. Synthetic pings stayed green, real users timed out. S told me to smooth the narrative and keep the focus on the fix velocity. That Monday, the client COO asked very calmly, how many unique users were error affected? S smiled and said, single digits. I watched the graph in my head, the one I had exported at 2:11 a.m. That's not accurate, I said, and gave the real number. The room went quiet, the kind of quiet where you can hear someone's watch tick. Afterward, in a side chat, the COO said, if it ever smells wrong, call me directly. I'm not special. I'm just the person who didn't blink. Back to the present. I waited on the lobby bench under the ficus, phone warming my cheek, while upstairs the meeting calendar block ticked closer. In my ear, muted voices, keyboard taps. The legal lead reading hashes out loud to confirm object integrity. Shea 256 matches, he said. You don't forget the relief of another human checking your math. All right, the COO said. At 10 a.m. you'll join the call. I'll invite you. You'll speak in facts, and you'll stop when I say stop. Yes, I said. It wasn't deference, it was alignment. My job is to be precise, not loud. While I waited, I opened the one-pager I'd built to be idiot-proof in a fire. It had 3 sections. 1. Timeline variance. The official deck showed a single event block. The system log showed 3 discrete incidents, totaling 127 minutes, not 41. Links, read-only dashboards, metric exports, alert suppression diffs. I wrote it like a pilot's checklist. Verbs, times, nouns. No adjectives. 2. Threshold drift. Screenshots of SLL language as contracted verses for presentation thresholds, with track change history and the email chain where procurement explicitly rejected quarterly roll-ups last year. I even circled the clause number. Circles are for civilians. Clauses are for adults. 3. Data alteration chain. Version control proof that the 6:17 a.m. edits came from S's device, plus a short note on why images. Only final decks are a control failure. When slides are JPEGs, your truth has been baked and sugared. You can eat it, but you can't verify the ingredients. Why this level of detail? Because I've learned that drama's loud, but decisions are made in small print. Juniors get told to be solutions-oriented, which in practice means don't bring bad news. Ops people know the opposite truth. The sooner you surface the wound, the less amputations later. At 9:54 a.m., S called me. The new analyst who DM'd me last month. At 9:57, hey, is it okay if I keep the full we are aligned right up in my own drive? Do not improvise. Like things disappear. I almost laughed. Improvisation is what she does when a folder with legal holds. I am aggressively the shared compliance mailbox. A list. You don't teach rebellion. You teach lanes. If leadership drives on the shoulder, you want your people in the right lane with their blinkers on. 10 a.m. drew a line through my calendar. My phone buzzed with an invite. I joined from the lobby, camera off, name visible. The gallery popped. Client COO, their legal, our VP of sales. S with her conference room smile. 2 bored observers with eyes like smoked glass. S launched into her opener, the high-gloss kind, momentum, efficiency, unwavering commitment. Her deck was on screen, gradients, sanitized bars, a single neatly contained event. Before we dive in, the COO said, I want to ask about the 6:17 a.m. changes. Her pointer moved to the corner of the shared file, where the timestamp sat like a coffee ring you can't buff out. S's voice didn't crack. She's good under pressure. We made minor formatting updates for clarity. Clarity, the COO repeated. Tap, tap. Would you define clarity as removing the known issues slide? Those issues were closed, S said quickly. Closed is not the same as non-existent, Legal murmured. Then, we've invited my name. 5 minutes. Facts only. I spoke the way I'd rehearsed at the ficus. Time, source, delta. I described the alert suppression window extension without a change request. I stated the exact number of user sessions affected. I referenced clause 6.2.1, where monthly SLA is defined, and clause 10.4, where unilaterally altering reporting constitutes a breach of audit provisions. I didn't say lied, spun, or whitewashed. Those are editorial verbs. I stayed with was, occurred, removed, moved. S tried to cut in. The COO held up a finger, tiny on screen. Let him finish. When I ended, there was a sound I now associate with competence. A long collective exhale that means people have stopped playing defense and started looking for the path forward. Sales tried to salvage it. Regardless of reporting format, we've delivered tremendous value. Value is not a substitute for transparency, Legal said, not unkindly. Transparency is a prerequisite for value. Our GC, who had quietly joined, spoke next. Until we perform an internal review, I'm recommending a temporary hold on external distribution of the altered materials and a freeze on deck edits. We'll also produce a corrective disclosure packet with complete timelines. That was the first time I unclenched my jaw that morning. S said, "This feels punitive over a formatting question." The board observer finally spoke. It's not formatting when risk is obscured. The problem is not the incidents, it's the decision to hide them. His camera never moved, only his voice did. Procedurally, the rest was boring and therefore life-saving. Action items, owners, deadlines. I was assigned to produce the canonical incident chronology and to partner with the client's SRE on cross-validation. We scheduled a remediation review with both legals present. We agreed on language for a client-facing note. Direct, non-defensive, no weather metaphors. When the call ended, my phone vibrated with a message from the COO, short and without punctuation. "Thank you. Send me your checklist template." A second later, one from GC. "Please forward your pipeline configuration notes and object lock settings." These are the texts that convince you you're not crazy, that the planet you live on actually shares a sun with someone else. Downstairs, the security guard watched me stand up. "Everything good?" he asked quietly. "If
Not
you've
yet,"
been told
I
to
said,
keep things
but better.
positive,
He
when the
nodded
honest
like
thing
he'd
is
heard that
negative,
before.
you know this feeling in your bones. It's not rebellion. It's maintenance. The building stands because someone checks the bolts, even when the brochure says modern open concept. If you want more long-game, receipt-heavy stories like this, no fluff, just the processes that keep the wheels from coming off, tap follow so the next part finds you without you having to hunt for it. The COO's face filled the top of the screen, steady, unreadable. "You have 5 minutes," she said. "Use them." My throat was dry, but I spoke the way you do when you've practiced every syllable in your head. At 6:17 this morning, the deck was altered from this machine. 3 incidents totaling 127 minutes were condensed to one block of 41. SLA thresholds were shifted from monthly to quarterly in the reporting view. Here are the immutable logs. I pasted links into the chat. For a moment, only silence, then her legal lead. "Hashes verified. These are not screenshots. They are live read-only exports." He turned toward my boss. "Why was this not disclosed?" S launched into her smoothest tone. "We streamlined for clarity. The issues were closed. No deception was intended." "Closed isn't the same as absent," the COO said, each word like a nail driven evenly into wood. "When we ask about resilience, we're asking about the number of times you fell and got up, not how clean you look afterward." On my screen, the board observer leaned forward. His camera froze for half a second, catching him mid-blink, then unfroze. "Who made the edit at 6:17? He asked. S tried to pivot. Our team works collaboratively. Versions change." "Device ID," I said, not loud, just level. The system logs attribute the final edit to her laptop. GC raised his hand like a referee. Until this is resolved, I recommend a freeze on further changes. Compliance will generate a corrective disclosure pack. His eyes moved to me. Stay on standby. We'll need your chronology. The COO didn't thank me in front of the group, but her gaze held on mine for a heartbeat. Longer than necessary. In a world where everything is spin, that felt like the only currency that mattered. Then came the flood. Questions, crosstalk, fragments of careers shifting in real time. Sales tried to reframe it as a misunderstanding. No, legal cut him off. S fought to reclaim ground with words like context and efficiency. But every sentence she spoke, every syllable polished, only made the raw timestamps in my packet more damning. By the time the call ended, the temperature of the room had changed. No one said it out loud, but everyone knew. A line had been crossed, and the record now lived outside her control. I sat in the lobby under the ficus, phone buzzing with new emails, hands still trembling. Above me, through floors of glass and airless conference rooms, the edifice of curated narratives was beginning to crack. I didn't feel victorious. I felt the way you do when you pull a fire alarm, ears ringing, adrenaline flooding, but also the quiet certainty that pretending the smoke wasn't there would have been worse. That night, lying awake with my laptop open, I saw the meeting replay in my head. Every phrase, every frozen camera frame, the COO's steady voice. Closed isn't the same as absent. The board observer's calm question, who made the edit at 6:17? And my own words, factual, bare, sitting in the chat log like stones no one could lift out. If you've ever wondered what it feels like when the truth enters a room built entirely on polish, it doesn't explode, it doesn't scream. It just sits there, immovable, until every shiny surface bends around it. And once it's there, nobody can pretend it isn't. If you want to follow the fallout, the HR interviews, the scramble, and the way the dominoes fell, stick around. Part 4 is where the real consequences start. I was summoned the next morning with the subject line no one wants to see. Investigatory interview. Mandatory attendance. HR conference room, 9:30 a.m. Neutral gray walls. Pitcher of water already sweating on the table. A box of tissues placed in the exact center like an omen. The HR lead smiled with professional warmth. "This is just fact-finding," she said, which, in my experience, translates to, "We already have a conclusion, and we're hoping you'll walk into it voluntarily." Across from her sat someone from legal, not our GC, but a deputy, quiet, sharp-eyed, notebook open. They started with tone-setting questions. When did you notice the edits? Why didn't you raise them with your manager first? Do you believe your actions undermine the company's credibility? I answered with the same structure I used in the meeting. Timestamp, document ID, immutable link. I never speculated on motives. I never used adjectives. Every time they tried to drag me toward intent, I anchored to behavior. At 6:17, the deck was altered. 3 slides were removed. The logs confirmed the device of origin. Halfway through, the HR lead sighed. "You understand this has created reputational challenges." I almost laughed. Challenges? The only challenge had been convincing people to look at the real numbers. But I kept my tone level. I understand that failing to disclose material incidents would have created greater challenges. The deputy, from legal, finally spoke. "Do you have independent copies of the materials?" I nodded. "They're in the compliance vault with object lock. I have no personal copies." This was true. Belt and suspenders. Protect yourself, but also show you respect the rules. The interview ended without fireworks. "We'll be in touch," HR said, her smile thinner now. I walked out with the odd calm that comes when you know you've already pushed your chips in. Whatever happened next, the record couldn't be erased. That afternoon, the Whisper network lit up. A coworker DM'd. S's badge didn't work this morning. Another. IT forensics pulled device logs. Rumor is they match the edit timestamp exactly. No one said terminated. The phrase was administrative leave pending review. In corporate speak, that's the sound of the guillotine being cranked upward. Meanwhile, the client didn't wait. At 2:07 p.m., the COO sent an email to our execs. Renewal contingent on remediation led by my name. Sales forwarded it to me with a note that was equal parts relief and disbelief. Guess you're running point now. Congrats? It wasn't congrats. It was survival. The company wanted the account too badly to argue. By evening, I had a draft contract amendment in my inbox, reclassified as independent consultant, reporting directly to client and GC, triple my previous rate. Same work, different badge, less leverage over me. The first night after the storm, I slept 10 straight hours. No 2 a.m. Slack pings. No dread of waking to a sanitized deck. Just silence. The kind that feels earned. But even in the quiet, I kept replaying the week. The COO's clipped voice. The board observer's calm question. S's face when the timestamp was read aloud. For months, I'd felt like Cassandra, shouting into a hurricane of spin. Now the wind had died, and people finally heard the words. If you've ever had to drag the truth into the light, you know the aftermath isn't fireworks. It's paperwork, HR memos, badge audits, policy rewrites, boring, tedious, life-saving paperwork. And in the background, the sound of dominoes, tipping one after another. That was just the first week. The real consequences after the meeting felt like a controlled demolition. And not all of them landed where I expected. Every day, another wall came down. Monday. It froze access to the shared drives. Overnight, half of the icons on my colleagues' desktops turned into little gray question marks. People whispered in Slack threads with names like Project X and New Deck. S's calendar still showed recurring one-on-ones, but no one could see her in the office. Her name was reduced to a 3-letter placeholder. On leave. Tuesday, HR scheduled clarification sessions. The euphemism made everyone tense. They pulled in junior analysts one by one. A teammate messaged me afterward. They asked if I'd ever been told to adjust an incident count. I just gave them the logs. Another wrote, they wanted to know if we were instructed not to use the word outage. I said yes. The pattern was clear. The company wasn't trying to rescue S. They were insulating themselves from her. Wednesday. A confidential memo circulated marked for internal distribution only. It wasn't subtle. It quoted the compliance policy on unapproved modifications, the one that had sat dusty in the wiki for years. Every example matched what S had done. It was like someone had copied my one-pager and turned it into official doctrine. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt hollow. Rules are comforting only when they're enforced before the fire. Thursday. I was on a joint call with the client's SRE. We compared our logs line by line, timestamps clicking into place like teeth in a gear. When we finished, he said quietly, "We've wanted this visibility for months. Glad someone finally put it on paper." That was the closest thing to gratitude I'd get, and it was enough. Friday morning, a new badge arrived in the mail. Independent consultant. External partner. Same building, different color. I walked through the turnstiles with that badge for the first time, and the guard nodded like nothing had changed. But it had. I was no longer inside their chain of command. I wasn't optional. I was necessary. And yet, beneath the surface, anxiety lingered. I caught myself flinching when my phone buzzed, half expecting another "do not attend" message. At night, I replayed the interview in my head, rehearsing what I'd said, checking if I'd slipped. My body hadn't gotten the memo that I'd survived. By the end of the week, the rumors solidified into facts. S's laptop had been seized by forensics. Badge logs showed her entering the office at 6:11 a.m., the day of the edits. She had texted a junior analyst at 6:13, "Don't open the file until I say." At 6:17, the slides changed. When questioned, the analyst handed over the chat screenshot. It matched everything I'd said. Saturday morning, I woke to a calendar invite from the client COO. Remediation kickoff, led by my name. Not joint, not supporting. Led. That word settled something in my chest I hadn't realized was still unsettled. That weekend was the first time in months I didn't bring my laptop to the dinner table. I cooked slowly without glancing at my phone. I slept 8 hours straight. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full. But karma doesn't cash out in a single week. It waits. It builds. Yeah, and months later, when the loop finally closed, it did so in a way I couldn't have scripted better, if I tried. If you want to hear how the story ended, the moment S's past came back for her in the most poetic way possible. Don't miss
Months
part
rolled
6.
by,
And that's where karma finally
itself
collected around policies that looked suspiciously like the notes I'd drafted under stress. Slides could no longer be flattened into JPEGs. Incident logs were published directly from monitoring tools, with hashes displayed at the bottom of every report. New hires were trained to treat negative data as required disclosure, not optional noise. Quietly, the floor felt safer. Juniors stopped DMing me about disappearing slides. The air got lighter. I settled into my new rhythm as an external consultant. Same building, different badge, triple the rate, none of the leash. I worked with the client's team directly, producing clean reports, the kind that hold up in daylight. Every time I walked past the turnstiles with that new badge, I felt the difference in my chest. I wasn't begging for access anymore. I was there by choice. And then came the twist. One afternoon, I got a message from a partner firm where I'd recently been brought in as a consultant. "We're reviewing a candidate with your former company. Can you provide a reference?" Attached was the resume. There it was, S's name, neatly printed with bullet points about transformational leadership and narrative clarity. I sat for a long moment, staring at the screen. I could have written paragraphs. I could have unloaded every frustration, every 2 a.m. Slack, every junior analyst pushed to edit words until they cried. But revenge isn't loud. It doesn't need adjectives. I opened the board, minutes from the renewal meeting, the official record signed and time-stamped. They contained every fact. The edits, the timestamps, the compliance freeze. No embellishment, no spin. Just the truth, preserved in corporate ink. I forwarded the document with one line, "Facts attached." 2 days later, the partner firm replied, "Thank you for your clarity. We will not be moving forward with this candidate." I didn't cheer. I didn't screenshot it for friends. I closed the email, finished my coffee, and went back to my work. Because the point was never to watch her fall. It was to prove that the truth, once spoken and preserved, has a half-life far longer than spin. Weeks later, I walked through the lobby again, visitor badge hanging from my jacket. Same ficus, same polished floor, same security guard. He nodded at me. "Back again?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, "by choice." And I thought about that text. "Don't come to the meeting." The last order I ever took from her. If you want more real-world stories where the truth eventually cashes out, slow, steady, undeniable, make sure you're subscribed, because sometimes the quietest receipts end up speaking the loudest.